Everything you're about to see took place over a tiny fraction of a single turn. It was at this point, with over 900 possible activations and tens of thousands of potential points of damage remaining, that I got bored. Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 record building guide, where today we're building the highest amount of damage that can be dealt in a single round in Baldur's Gate 3. This character, when fully built, will deal on average more than 12,000 points of damage in an area in a single round. That's enough to kill every major boss in Baldur's Gate in a single turn, and with a theoretical maximum of 16,128 damage in one turn. This build uses no exploits, all of its abilities work on honor mode, and in fact on lower difficulty settings, the damage numbers can be significantly higher because of the way that honor mode damage stacking works. So this is a damage record for honor mode, and requires no bug abuse, no exploits. I've been extremely strict with what I'm counting as an exploit to get the highest possible damage in the game. The basis for this build is going to be the same as my Speedster build, with some minor variations. You can find that build guide under the fastest possible character in Baldur's Gate 3, and I'll put a link in the description as well. We're going to be, instead of using our incredible speed to get the maximum possible distance moved in a single turn, to go at Mach 7, we're going to be using it to get the maximum possible activations of Hammerhaft. Hammerhaft is a weapon that, whenever you jump, deals area of effect damage around you, and because of a way that the game interprets the fly action as jumping, because Baldur's Gate flying is just jumping, you don't actually fly, you just sort of hop, you get to activate Hammerhaft a near infinite number of times in a turn, as long as you have enough movement speed. The more movement speed we get, the more damage we're going to be able to do, and so we can stack damage on top of that for a truly absurd amount of damage in a single round. Because I already covered the details of these builds, I'm going to just quickly walk you through them and talk about the variations between this version of the build and the Speedster version of the build, but for more detailed guides to how to build these two characters, because yes, you do need two characters to make this work, you can go refer to that video, which is linked below. It's also really fun because we get to travel at Mach 7 and go fast enough that we would launch off the surface of the planet and into space. For our first character, we of course have to be a wood elf because we need to maximize our movement speed, so we're always going to start as a wood elf. I'm using the wood half-elf hireling here because that's very easy to get a wood elf, and you can get her right from the beginning of the game. We're going to be starting by taking levels in Barbarian, because that's going to get us Elk Heart Barbarian Rage, which will increase our movement speed. The only other important thing at level 1 is just to take as much dexterity as you can. In order for this combo to work, you want this character and your other character to be acting on the same turn in combat. It doesn't matter if they go first, but the easiest way to ensure that they act on the same turn is just to win initiative with both of them, so higher dexterity definitely helps. Barbarian level 2 doesn't do anything for us, but Barbarian level 3 lets us take Wildheart Barbarian, and with Wildheart Barbarian, we can take the Elk Heart Rage of the Wildheart Barbarian, which gives us an additional 4.5 meters of move speed. By the way, I'm going to be using metric throughout this video because the game was written originally in metric and then converted to the imperial system. So while usually I use feet because I'm just used to it from tabletop D&D, it's more precise if we measure in meters. It doesn't introduce rounding errors, and for numbers this large, rounding errors are a real problem. So we're just going to be using the metric system to ensure precision when we're measuring how much damage this character actually will do. That's it for Barbarian level 3, though, so let's move on to Barbarian level 4. And at level 4, we're going to take our first feat, and the feat that we're going to take is Mobile. This gives us an extra 3 meters of movement speed base, so that increases our character's movement speed. We're going to be multiplying our move speed a lot with items and other abilities, so every increase to our base movement speed gives us a ton of additional move speed, and that, in turn, gives us a ton of additional damage. When we are actually activating this character, each meter of movement speed that we have is an additional activation of Hammercraft. So each meter of movement speed adds a huge amount of additional damage because we just proc it so many times per turn. At level 5, we're going to be taking Barbarian level 5 for fast movement, which gives us an additional 3 meters of movement speed. Now, technically, this is everything that we need from Barbarian, but we're sort of left with one odd level over at the end of this build, so we're just going to go ahead and take Barbarian level 6, because that is going to get us an animal aspect, which lets us take Aspect of the Beast Elk, which gives us an extra 1.5 meters of movement speed. Now, obviously, you can have an ally use Aspect of the Beast Elk for the aura, but since this character has a spare level, we might as well just grab it with this character so that we don't have to use a third character in order to accomplish the same goal. There's a couple different variations of building this character that could reach the same level of movement speed. This is the one that I think requires the least setup and plays out the most naturally, and doesn't require you to do weird things like enter and exit turn-based mode before you start combat to maximize your actions, because you can cheese out extra actions sometimes by doing that. But this way works 100% of the time in turn-based mode. It will be very, very consistent. The setup always works the same way every time, so you don't have to rely on any glitches or weird behaviors of the game in order to maximize your movement speed and thus your damage if you go with this order. There's a couple different variations for the Speedster build that were pointed out in the comments there that are great for that, but this is the build that I think will give us the most damage. Having gotten Elk Totem Barbarian, we're going to continue, and we're now going to multiclass, and we're going to multiclass into Rogue. Rogue will give us an extra bonus action. Now, we could use 6 levels of Monk for the extra bonus action, and that would give us some additional base movement speed from Monk. From Open Hand Monk, you get an action that lets you use extra bonus actions. But weirdly, with the setup, we don't have enough actions to activate the Open Hand Monk's abilities, as well as all the other things that we want to do. The number of actions that we have is actually somewhat constrained for how we're building the character. So, playing with Rogue is going to give us additional setup. We also want Fighter for Action Surge, because this character wants to swap gear a lot on the first turn of combat in order to maximize both our move speed and our damage, because different gear will provide speed and damage. And so having Action Surge gives us an extra action, so we can swap one more piece of gear, gives us more damage overall. So we're going to go with the Rogue version of the build here. Rogue level 2 gets us Cunning Action Dash, which of course is very important, especially since we're not actually taking Monk levels in this version of the build, so this will let us double our movement speed as a bonus action. And at Rogue level 3, we get Thief Rogue, which gives us another bonus action so that we can use Cunning Action Dash or our other bonus action abilities, such as entering a Rage for more movement speed, more times in the opening round of combat. Finally, at Rogue level 4, we're going to be taking our second feat, and this one doesn't increase our movement speed, but does increase our damage. The feat that we're going to take is one that I may never have actually taken on this channel before. We're going to take Elemental Adept for Elemental Adept Thunder. The reason for this is that when you deal thunder damage with a spell, you can't roll a 1. Now, the text here is actually wrong. This is just whenever you deal any thunder damage, you can't roll a 1. So it works for the thunder damage that we're getting from Hammercraft, because the tooltip here is wrong. It just works on all thunder damage that your character deals with Elemental Adept Thunder. So this increases the average damage. It doesn't increase the total damage that we do, but it increases the average damage by 0.5 point per activation, because we would be normally rolling a d4 of damage on Hammercraft for an average of 2.5 damage, but now we're rolling effectively a 2 to 4 for an average of 3 damage. So we increase the damage every single time we activate it by 0.5 point. When you're talking about thousands and thousands of activations, that amount of damage really starts to add up. And having gotten our levels of Rogue and our second feat, we're going to multi-class this character one more time into Fighter. What fighting style or other actions we take at level 1 of Fighter does not matter at all. But at character level 2 of Fighter, we get Action Surge, which is going to let us use an extra action, which will let us swap one more piece of gear in order to maximize both our move speed and our damage when we want to actually use the character's combo. This build will give us both the most move speed and the most actions in order to be able to break the action economy, which we need to do in order to maximize our damage, and so this is the character that will actually be doing the damage, supported by our second character. For the second build, we're actually making this character identical to the build that was shown in my Speedster video for the second character. We're going to start with a level of Barbarian here. And again, the only important thing is that you want to have high dexterity so that you can win initiative with both characters relatively easily, just to make the setup for this combo more smooth to pull off. At character level 2, we don't get anything that matters, so we're going to keep leveling up in Barbarian, and then at Barbarian level 3, we're going to take Wildheart Barbarian for the Wolf Heart Barbarian Rage. This gives us Inciting Howl, which lets us increase allies' move speed by 3 meters during their next turn for an action. Now, something interesting was pointed out in the comments of my previous video, which is that Inciting Howl actually stacks, so we could have our entire party be Wolf Heart Barbarians, activating this over and over and over again, using haste potions and action surges and so on in order to activate 10 copies of Inciting Howl to get a huge bonus to our movement speed. I'm choosing to treat that as a bug, and so we're not going to be using it in this build, but I did want to mention that that is possible. Typically, in Dungeons & Dragons, the same ability like this won't stack with itself, and so you won't be able to just activate Inciting Howl 10 times for 30 meters of extra movement speed. But in Baldur's Gate 3, in the current patch, it does work that way. So if you want even more damage than we're about to show here, one way you can do that is have 2 more characters be fighters, at least level 5, be barbarians, with Inciting Howl, and fighters to Action Surge and Inciting Howl again. They can each do it up to 4 times in a turn with a haste potion and a Terrazul, so that could get you an extra, 24 meters of base movement speed. Even without that bug, though, the Inciting Howl bonus to movement speed is incredibly important, so we want to add that to our character. Next, we're going to level up again, and we're going to multiclass. We're going to take a levels in Fighter for this character as well. Character level 2 gets us Action Surge, which lets us just use more of our abilities in a turn. This character isn't as action constrained as the other character, but Action Surge does make it smoother to pull off, and you can do it without spending resources. So if you're actually using some version of this combo in play, I don't recommend doing the whole thing in an actual honor mode playthrough, by the way, because it's very tedious, but you can use this combo to cheese some fights or parts of it, so this just makes it smoother to do that if you actually want to do that. And then at character level 3, we're going to be taking Battlemaster Fighter, or Fighter level 3. We're going to be taking Battlemaster Fighter, which will get us Precision Attack to land the ability more easily, and Maneuvering Attack, which increases our other character's movement speed when we land a Maneuvering Attack. Now, Maneuvering Attack says that it increases half of your movement speed. It means half of the base movement speed for that character, so it's not as big an increase to your movement speed as you might think. But it's still, every little bit counts, and this can be provided by an ally without costing us any build resources, so it's very useful to be able to do that. For our last one, it doesn't really matter what we've got, so we can just pick up whatever, and then move on to our other class and multi-class again. For our last class, we're going to be taking Wizard. Wizard is going to give us access to a bunch of spells that we need, so we're going to be taking Long Strider is the most important of these spells. For the Speedster build, because we wanted to maximize distance, Enhanced Leap was also important, but for damage, since we're going to use Fly, we don't actually need Enhanced Leap. Might as well just learn it anyways. For our prepared spells, we're making sure that we have Long Strider prepared. That's the one that we need out of these prepared spells. And then we're going to continue to level in Wizard. For our subclass, we're going to take Transmutation Wizard for the Transmuter Stone of Speed. And then we're going to keep just buying whatever spells we happen to want. None of these spells selections matter at all, so we can just kind of take whatever. Obviously, you can take spells that actually would help your characters in combat, like Cloud of Daggers, or a utility spell like Invisibility to make setting up the combo in range of actively hostile enemies easier. But for the purposes of this video, it doesn't matter what we pick here. Character level 4, we're going to take Alert, just to make sure that we have our character go first, and of course we will take True Strike, just to annoy people in the YouTube comments, which works every single time. Then we are going to take a Misty Step and a Flaming Sphere and move on to the next level. At this level, if you don't want to use potions for this, you can use Haste and Fly potions. Haste and Fly, obviously you can't use both of those at once, but we will be using both of those spells. You can also take Counterspell for this character to make it easier to set up without the enemy having a reaction that maybe could stop your character from doing something, or casting a disabling spell before combat starts, and before you can unleash your unbridled fury upon them. But really, for Wizard, we're here for Wizard level 6, which gets us the Transmuter Stone, which can be turned into the Transmutation Stone of Speed for an extra, I think it's 3 more meters of base move speed just for holding it in your inventory, so it makes the character go faster without costing them an item slot, which of course makes them more powerful overall, and is free, so we get to do even more damage. Alright, that's both of the builds, but of course we need to talk about gear for the character, since that's where a lot of our damage and mobility is going to be coming from, so let's do that next. For items for our combination, there's a few different kinds of items that we need specifically. First up, of course, we have to have Hammercraft. How this weapon works is whenever the wearer jumps, or does a jump-like action, you deal 1d4 thunder damage in a 3 meter or 10 foot radius wherever you land. This is an area of effect damage and can be activated any number of times per turn as long as you can keep jumping. There's several ways to do this. One of them is to be a monk and have Step of the Wind jump. That's what we used in order to get the maximum distance moved, because you can jump up to 30.5 meters at a cost of 3 meters of your movement speed, so it effectively multiplies your movement speed by 10. But that means that you're spending 3 meters of movement speed every time you want to activate Hammercraft. The real way to do it is to use Fly. Fly also counts as jumping and can be activated the same way as jumping can, but the minimum flight distance only requires 1 meter of movement speed. I've actually gotten it to proc where it only removes 0.5 meter of movement speed in some locations and under some circumstances, but in most arenas, for whatever reason, and I'm not sure why that's the case, it seems to be somewhat inconsistent, in most arenas, it's always at least 1 meter of movement speed in order to activate Fly, so that's the number that we're going to go with for our calculations here. So, every time we fly, it takes 1 meter of our movement speed, and we get a d4 of thunder damage as long as we have Hammercraft equipped. Now, of course, we want to increase the amount of damage that we're doing every time we do that. We have a couple different items that are going to let us increase our damage. The first of these is our old friend, the Callous Glow Ring. Against illuminated enemies, this does an extra 2 points of radiant damage on basically every damage source. That includes Hammercraft. Secondly, the Ring of Absolute Force. The Ring of Absolute Force gives you, if you have the Absolute's brand, so you do have to have this character have the brand of the Absolute in order to use this item, although, actually, this item is bugged and works even without the brand as of the current patch, but again, we're avoiding bugs and exploits here, so to keep everything on the up and up, we get the brand of the Absolute on our character, branded, and then we get an extra 1 thunder damage every time we do damage with Hammercraft or any other source of damage. Next, we want to increase our movement speed as much as possible. There's actually very few items that don't conflict for these item slots that will increase our movement speed, but there's a few that we can use that are either slotless or will boost our movement speed all day or don't take up the same slot. For our first item here, we want the Elixir of Elven Elegance. This is a unique elixir. It can be got by talking to Araj Obladra and having an elf in your party, which conveniently this character is an elf. And when drunk, it increases your movement speed by 10 meters all day. So that's a huge boost to our movement speed. Next up, the Boots of Elemental Momentum. This is the only way to gain momentum outside of combat. So when we do damage with a spell or cantrip before combat starts, we can stack up momentum. Now, because we need our ring slots for damage rather than for Crusher's Ring and the Spurred Band, like the Speedster build, we will only have 4 momentum instead of 5 on the first turn of combat, because we'll have to swap out the boots and everything, and we won't be able to gain extra momentum from the Spurred Band. But 20 additional feet of movement speed, or 6 meters of extra movement speed on the Boots of Elemental Momentum is still going to be a significant increase and the best we can do for a single item slot. Next up, we need the Martial Exertion Gloves. The Martial Exertion Gloves let you double your movement speed, and this interacts with Dash in a really interesting way. Dash, when you activate it, actually only adds your base movement speed over again. It doesn't fully double your movement speed, but the Martial Exertion Gloves, with this ability that doesn't take an action to activate, and the Click Heels boots, the Boots of Speed with the Click Heels, these actually double your current movement speed value. So when we have stacked all our dashes, we can activate them for a tremendous increase to our movement speed. Next, we need the Helmet of Grit. This character wants to have as many bonus actions as possible to activate all our abilities, so the Helmet of Grit lets us have an extra bonus action without having to have 6 levels of Monk or somehow get that from another class feature. Finally, for our last damage increasing item, the Gloves of Belligerent Skies will let us inflict reverberation whenever we deal thunder damage. That means that every 3 times we damage an enemy, and it's actually a little more than every 3 times, every 2.5 times we damage an enemy, they're going to get enough stacks of reverberation that it will trigger for an extra d4 of thunder damage. When reverberation pops, it does an extra d4 of thunder damage, so we do even more damage. This damage does benefit from our elemental adept feature, the reverberation damage, and it also benefits from the Ring of Absolute Force, so the reverberation damage adds even more damage to all of our procs. Finally, we need some potions in order to boost our character the maximum distance possible. We need the Potion of Flying so that we can actually use flying. Of course, you can use a spell of flying as well, or a scroll or something. And a Potion of Speed so that we have haste. Haste here says that it doubles our movement speed with the Potion of Speed. That's actually not true. Haste adds just a flat 9 meters to your movement speed, no matter your movement speed. Even for a wood elf who has extra base move speed, haste is always just plus 9 meters to your move speed. So the double your move speed tooltip here is actually just incorrect. In addition to the Potion of Speed, we also have Terrazul, which gives you the Terrazul Jitters, which has the same effect as haste, doubling your movement speed, or rather adding 9 meters to your movement speed, but also stacks. So these are our items that we're going to use to set up our character. Finally, one more important item, because we're trying to do as much damage as possible in a given turn, and you knew this was going to show up somewhere. We all, of course, need Falara Luv, because Falara Luv's Shriek ability causes enemies to take an extra 1d4 thunder damage every time they take damage if they're in the area of the Shriek. we can't have both Hammerhaft and Felarluv equipped, so we have to have an ally wield it, but this will increase our overall damage dramatically as well. Alright, that's every item. Let's move on to buffs and setup. Sometime before we want to start this combo, we need to activate some day-long buffs. The first thing that we're going to do is create a Transmuter Stone, and we're going to create a Transmuter Stone of Speed. Where is it? Here we go. Then we're going to give that to our main character here. And also, with a level 1 spell slot, we're going to Ritual cast Longstrider on them for 10 more feet of movement speed. So this is an extra 6 meters of movement speed overall, just from day-long buffs. This character also, of course, is going to activate Aspect of the Elk for 1.5 extra meters of movement speed. This means before we actually start anything, our character has 34 meters of movement speed, without having any of our gear and other items equipped. But, of course, before we start, we're going to boost our move speed dramatically, so let's go ahead and do that as we get into T-3 before our launch. So, we're 3 turns before we want to start this. I've gone ahead and gone into the city and entered turn-based mode, in order to demonstrate that we do this all in turn-based mode without any issues, and reduced our hit points to 50% or lower in order to activate the Helmet of Grit's bonus action. You can just bonk your character with another character until you see this, this ability icon show up. Next, we're going to set up our momentum. I actually forgot to mention this, and I forgot to mention it in the previous video until we were doing it as well. That's kind of funny. But one other item that you need is a scroll of any damaging cantrip in order to allow us to trigger the Boots of Elemental Momentum to generate momentum. So we're going to go ahead and just drop 3 of any object with hit points. In this case, I'm going to use bottles of water just because it's easy to do. So any object with hit points and any 3 cantrip scrolls will allow us to set up the maximum damage. On T-3 before we start, the only thing that we have to do is drink a potion of flying, and then, which will set up our flight, and then we are going to go ahead and end the turn. 1 turn down, and we're now at T-2 before we want to start doing maximum possible damage, so we now need to begin the rest of our setup. We're going to go ahead and activate a Scroll of Firebolt and break one of these bottles of water. As you can see, that gives us 2 turns of momentum, which gives us an additional 3 meters of movement speed. That's it for this turn, so let's go ahead and end the turn again. And then at T-2, this is where things get a little bit more intricate. We're going to go ahead and cast another Scroll of Firebolt for more turns of momentum, and drink a Potion of Speed, which boosts our movement speed even further, and cast another Scroll of Firebolt. It's important with the Potion of Speed, even though it says it doubles our movement speed, it only adds 9 meters no matter what our base movement speed is, so that brings us up to a total of 51 meters of movement speed. However, we can get even faster, and we're going to have Minthara help us out with that by activating her unique ability, Soul Branding. Soul Branding gives you an extra 1.5 meters of movement speed and is unique to Minthara, which is why we have to use her as our second build for this setup. In addition to that, she's just going to go ahead and activate Felarluv for Shriek in order to do the maximum possible damage, of course. And that's it at T-1. So let's go on to our damage turn. On the turn where we want to do damage, a lot of things are going to happen at once. Firstly, we're going to activate Minthara's ability, Maneuvering Attack, in order to enter combat. We're going to go ahead and do this on Fist Cuthbert here in order to get us into combat.
Witnessed assaulting someone.
Do not react. And we just want to make sure that our characters have both one initiative, or at least are operating on the same turn, so that we can move back and forth between them freely. Having done that, we now can have our main character here enter a rage. And then when the very long yelling animation is done, we can also have Minthara enter a rage. Having entered a rage, Minthara can now use an action surge and activate Inciting Howl in order to increase our main character's movement speed by 3 more meters. back to the main character, and they can then activate their own action surge in order to get another action so that we can continue to swap gear. With that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and down a Terrazul. This takes no action to consume, and is just going to give us 9 more meters of movement speed for 71 meters overall. Once that is out of the way, we're going to have Minthara activate the Forced Maneuver ability to boost our character's movement speed even further. And this again just gives you half of your base movement speed, or in this case, it's actually half of just 9 meters. So it's just 4.5 meters of movement speed flat. It doesn't increase your movement speed by half, the way that the tooltip says. So we're going to go up to 75 total meters of movement speed before we start activating multipliers. The first multiplier that we're going to activate for this character is going to be a Cunning Action Dash. Cunning Action Dash says that it doubles your movement speed, and that's sort of true. What it does is it doubles your base movement speed after other flat modifiers, but not other multiplicative modifiers. So with Cunning Action Dash, we are going to always get 75 extra meters of movement speed when we activate this ability. It's just going to give us 75 flat. That's the same when we use an action to activate Dash, and we need to use both actions and bonus actions to activate it, so that's going to give us 75 more meters of movement speed. And then we are going to, with another action, activate Dash again. Just gonna quick save here in case I mess up the setup a little bit. Having done that, we're going to spend one of our actions in order to swap our Boots of Speed for or Boots of Elemental Momentum for the Boots of Speed. Note that we keep the momentum that we have. We still have 4 turns of momentum for 6 meters of movement speed when we make that swap. And doing that allows us to, as a bonus action, activate the Click Heals ability. Now, Click Heals is different from Cunning Action Dash in that it actually doubles our movement speed. So instead of just adding 75, it's going to add 300, bringing our movement speed up to a nice even 600 meters. Finally, we're going to use the Gloves of Martial Exertion, which we can do without spending an action in order to take a little bit of damage. But again, this actually fully doubles our movement speed. So we're going to go from 600 to a nice round 1200 meters. I think this is more than I had in my testing. So I think we're going to actually get more damage, in this video than I got in my testing. I must have missed one step when I tested it. So the numbers that I said at the beginning of the video are actually going to be a little bit higher in the final analysis. Having done that, we're spending our last action to swap in the Gloves of Belligerent Skies, which is going to let us add Reverberation for even more damage. We're now out of actions and out of bonus actions with 1200 meters to spend on flying. With that amount of movement speed, we're ready to start doing some damage. So let's go ahead and move Minthara over to where the enemy is affected by Falar Louv, and then we're going to use our flight movement in order to jump next to the enemy that we wish to hurt. That's going to cause a bunch of other enemies to start running over probably, so let's go ahead and do that. And as they come over here, what I'm going to do is find an isolated enemy to show you the actual damage numbers on. Somebody in the light, ideally. So let's go with Fist Edge Arensen. We're going to have Minthara run over here until Edge Arensen is in the damage radius. So let's go ahead and fly over, and we're going to showcase just how much damage we're doing to this poor guy. As you can see here, he takes 4 instances of damage from a single flight. That damage is a d4 plus 1 with a minimum roll of 2 from the Shockwave from Hammercraft. Then 2 additional damage from the Callous Glow Ring. Then we take a d4 plus 1 damage with a minimum roll of 2 from Falar Louv. Notice that the Falar Louv damage counts as coming from the character that took the action, not the character that's carrying Falar. So we benefit from all of our bonus damage effects for this character. And then finally, 2 more radiant damage. They also got some reverberation. So let's see if we can... It's kind of hard to make sure we're actually hitting them here. So as we jump on them again and again, You can see here we get an extra trigger from Reverberation to knock them prone and deal an extra d4 of damage from the Reverberation. Reverberation on Tactician mode or below will also apply the Callous Glow ring damage. On Honor mode, it doesn't. So for this video, we're not getting that additional damage. But on lower difficulty settings, you're going to be getting even more damage than is displayed here. Let's do a little bit of math about that. So each time we activate Hammercraft, we're doing between 2 and 4 damage. Because we can't roll a 1, and then adding 1 to that. That's an average of 4 damage or a theoretical maximum of 5 damage. Each time we activate Falar Shriek, we're doing the same, so another average of 4 damage. And each time we activate Hammercraft and Falar we're also getting 2 damage from the Callous Glow ring. That gives us 4 plus 4 plus 2 plus 2 damage every turn for 12, or for every activation, for 12 damage every time we activate it. We can do this 1,200 times in a turn, so that gives us damage equal to 12 times 1,200 for 14,400 damage just from those base activations. We actually get even more damage than that, because we have Reverberation stacks. Every 3 times we activate Hammercraft, one enemy, now Reverberation will only stack on one enemy at a time. All of this 14,400 is AOE damage. The Reverberation damage is single target, sort of one at a time, because it only procs 1 time per damage source, no matter how many enemies you hit with it. But every 3 times we activate it, so 400 times in a turn, we are going to be doing a Reverberation tick. Reverberation is worth an additional 4 damage, because it's the same 2 to 4 plus 1 as the previous. So that adds 4 times 400, or 1,600 damage, to our damage total. That means that we are doing an average of 16,000 damage in a given turn. For our theoretical maximum damage, we can do that very simply. It's going to be 14 damage rather than 12. Again, times 1,200 is going to be 16,800 damage. And then rather than adding 1,600 damage for 5 times 4, we are going to be adding, for 400 times 4, we're going to be adding 400 times 5, or 2,000 damage, which is going to give us a theoretical maximum of 18,800 damage in a turn. So an average amount of damage of 16,000 with a theoretical maximum of 18,800. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at the highest possible damage in a single turn in Baldur's Gate 3. 16,000 average damage, most of it in an AoE, and 18,800 theoretical maximum damage if we somehow rolled a 4 on every one of several thousand d4s. As always with these theoretical maximum build videos, let me know if you think of a way to improve it. I suspect that I have not actually gotten the maximum amount of damage here, and I suspect also that if we find other ways to increase the damage, it's going to increase it enormously. I mean, you can see from the small math mistake that I made in this video, which changed the damage from 12,000 to 16,000, and I still don't even know what step I missed when I was testing it. Even very, very small increases in damage are going to yield tremendous results because we are adding so much additional damage. The first thing that I would look for, if I was looking for ways to increase the damage of this build further, is other things that trigger off of Hammercraft. These are the only ones that I was able to find, but if you find other items or effects that will do additional damage off of Hammercraft, then of course that will multiply our damage dramatically. So that would be the most impactful way, but also other ways to increase this character's movement speed would give us even more damage as well. Let me know, I will leave them in a pinned comment below, and I suspect that if you're watching this video in a couple months, the total amount of damage that we can do will be 10 or 100 times higher than what is listed in this video, with the brain trust of the entire internet behind us. Of course, if you have enjoyed the video, then leave a comment and hit like. Helps me out a ton with the algorithm, so I appreciate you taking the time to comment, and hit that button because YouTube loves it when you hit buttons. And you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 maximums, honor mode build guides, and other strategy game analysis. And of course, if you've really liked what I do, you can feel free to contribute by becoming a channel member or leaving a super thanks below, and I very much appreciate the people who do that. As always, my friends, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.